This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it's time for Avoid the Maze. I'm really, really excited about today's guest because when I read her bio and she said something about being an overthinker, I thought, that's me. That is absolutely me. In fact, I have a shirt, Mitzi, that says professional overthinker. I should have worn it today.
Oh man, I need to get that.
Yeah. And my son and I are professional overthinkers to the point that we can really make ourselves ill sometimes because you just like delve into a subject and it's like, well, if I did this, this would happen. And if I didn't do that, then this would happen. And you're like climbing this mountain and yet you're going nowhere at all.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
Mitzi, and is it Ocasio?
Yeah. Ocasio, you actually said it right.
I
Thank
said it
you.
right. Mitzi has a podcast about overthinking, and I'm really excited to find out like what got you to this point because so many of
Yes.
us don't even want to admit that we're overthinkers.
No, I absolutely agree with you. Well, I created Mitzi, let's think about it, because I realized that I can't be the only overthinker. You know what I mean? I can't be the only one over analyzing my emotions, my thoughts, the taboos that come in with life, just everything, because like you said, when I get into a thoughts, I can dive in and start exploring and exploring and exploring. And then before you know it, I'm drowning myself because I gone too deep. And then like you said, I get sick and then I get so overwhelmed and it affects my body. And then I realize, oh, doesn't need to go that far.
Right.
So I started this podcast exploring emotions, exploring taboos, and talking with other people and having them on as a guest on my show as well, because I needed to know that I'm not crazy, pretty much. Having just people out there that think with me or just think about certain topics and then they add more perspective into a topic. It's amazing. And I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about emotions within myself and with other people, and it actually helped my understanding. It helped me grow and evolve. And for people who, and like my husband, he hates it. He says, I'm thinking too much. I could be sitting in the car driving and I'm dead silent. He's like, Mitzi, stop thinking. I know you're thinking, stop thinking. And I'm just like, I can't stop thinking. He's like, leave it to your business. You don't need to think right now. Like, it's sometimes hard for me to just turn off my brain, but
Exactly.
I absolutely love it. I take it as like a superpower because I have random facts about random things randomly. So people would just bring up a random topic like, yes, did you know? Like, and I have these, it's funny. I think it's funny.
Well, I think all of us to a great degree are overthinkers.
Yes.
And, when I said earlier that it's a problem for me, it's a problem for me if I delve in so deep that I'm not thinking logically. And that
Yes.
often happens to a lot of people. We'll start off with, well, I'm supposed to go somewhere, but it's raining and maybe I should cancel. But if I cancel, then I'm behind. And if I'm behind, and it just like snowballs. And it's like, okay, take a deep breath. Now, think it through. If you can think it through logically, overthinking is good because you finally come up with a solution. But it's when we hear these voices in our head that are screaming at each other, do it this way, don't do it that way. Did you know this? Did you know that? That's the problem for me because I give in to those voices. And as I've talked about many times on this show, we all have voices in our head. They're the thoughts that we've learned up until today. So was there one specific time that you all of a sudden said, hey, I realize this is what I'm doing to myself. I'm overthinking.
Yes. Not one time, many times, let's be honest, many times. And it's kind of like in the direction that you were saying that you got to think logically, and I realized that that's when I have to start filtering out my thoughts. You know what I mean? I'm for whatever that is my main focus, or if I'm trying to stay focused for what I got to do for the day, then that's when I start clearing out my thoughts. I start realizing, okay, is it important for the moment? No. Does it have any realistic part in this situation? No. Like, no, I'm not gonna crash when I get in my car. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's just certain things that I just have to make myself realize, like, it just because it's a possibility does not necessarily mean it's going to happen. And I think that's the thing that people need to also remember is it fear that you're feeling? Is it that anxiety when you feel that just type of thought? And when I have those moments, I just tell myself, I don't need to think that. I say it out loud, I say it in my head. And it's kind of like you said, you have these voices, and I feel like it's your subconscious and your conscious mind just fighting with each other and just telling each other all these things. And that's when you really have to tell yourself, yes, that may have happened in the past, but it's not going to happen now. Or this may happening now, but it's not going to happen later, or it's not going to happen again. So it's something that you kind of have to know within yourself. You kind of have to, like, give yourself that moment and that time. And I think that's the most important thing, is because we will literally drive ourselves
Oh, yeah,
crazy,
absolutely.
absolutely crazy with our thoughts. If I really allowed myself to sit in my thoughts, somebody would probably think I'm like paralyzed and a vegetable. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because sometimes I can really leave my thoughts leaving me paralyzed and a vegetable. I'm like, "Ugh, I can't move." And my husband, he sees it sometimes. He's like, Mitzi, stop thinking. And so for me, I realized that I need to find an outlet to help me stop thinking. So for me, I love playing like video games, and reading, and writing. When I'm into those very artistic modes of just, that helps me get out of my now and get out of like this like, oh, and this infinity cycle that I'm in. So if somebody can just figure out what can really pull them away from their thoughts, I think that's the best thing.
Well, as I'm listening to you, talking about what you've been through, I think anybody who's listening to this podcast is going to relate to some degree. They may be a
Yeah.
little bit afraid to tell their partner or their best friend because they think they're crazy. But the
Yeah.
reality of it is, we absorb so much information all the time. And we are our own computer because everything we've learned from birth on, we're holding it in there. Um, One of the things that I know that causes me to really like take take it 130 steps ahead. I have a fear of bridges and heights. And if
Mhm.
I'm driving somewhere and I assume, I don't know my directions, but I assume there's a bridge up ahead, I keep thinking to myself, where can I get off and go around it? And I I overthink it. Well, if I get off here and I take that road, that's going to take me 10 minutes more. Oh, that's not so bad. But you know what? Maybe there's not a bridge ahead. So maybe I can keep going. And I've had to tell myself when I start to think that way, if you don't want to take the bridge, get off now. Don't think anymore. Take that road. And so I almost say to myself, stop thinking, like your husband said, okay, or stop thinking about that and do this
Mhm.
instead. And
Mhm.
it's not easy, but if we have the power to let those thoughts take hold of us, we also have the power to cut those thoughts down.
Yes, I love that. I love how you said that. I think it's perfectly stated, because not a lot of people think about that. Like, if you really think about how that makes you feel, then it'll really reflect differently. Because one of my biggest fears is pigs. I hate pigs. Oh, I hate pigs. I got attacked by a pig, so ever since I got attacked, I hate them now. I just hearing their little oink 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 just cringes. So for me, I avoid pigs completely because of that. Every time they say, "Oh, we're gonna head towards the farm and there's gonna be some pigs," I'm like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go all the way around. I'm not going around that." I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. And we all have something in our life that, you know, of affects us to the point that we have to think about how to avoid it. Okay. Um, my husband can't stand bugs. Okay. And if
Mm,
there's a fly in the house, he'll turn to me and he'll say, "Can you get that?" And I don't like bugs, but I can handle it. Um,
yeah,
and sometimes when you understand, what is driving you to uh, overthink something or help somebody else, it's good to. It's going to be funny that I'm going to say this, but it's good to talk about it, get it out, figure out where it comes from, um, and if it's something that you really want to avoid, then avoid it. You're taking the path in your journey. Okay.
yeah,
Why put yourself in so-called mental anguish
yeah.
while you're taking that journey?
What really intrigued me with what you just said was how it may sound funny to talk about it, but they should talk about it. And I think that's something that people need to restructure their mind from, that it's important to talk about things. It's important to talk about what's in your mind. It's important to talk about what you're feeling. It's important to have that communication, because the more communication you have, the more understanding people will have of you and what's going on within you. And I think that's a taboo in itself. For you to even say that, it just shows that it's a taboo, because people don't like to talk about things. People don't like to talk about what they're feeling inside because of maybe being vulnerable, or that fear of exposing the truth of who they are and people not accepting them. And I think it comes down to that person not accepting who they really are within them, because if you can't accept everything that you are or in what you're going through, then that means that you're not going to be willing to talk about it with other people. Like, I've had people look at me crazy for the certain things that I was willing and just openly able to talk about. And it's just funny to me, because it's like, that doesn't bother me. You know what I mean? It doesn't bother me. And you being a podcaster and having a radio show, more, just like myself, is that talking about these topics that we discuss, it's important because people think about these things, so we should have a voice that people can realize I'm not alone. So I think it's something that will eventually change and evolve, because I feel like this generation's evolving to the point of needing that communication versus all
Absolutely.
those years of generations just hiding it and covering it up and brushing it under the rug. Like, that was the norm. That was the norm.
Well, and it's interesting because I think as a podcaster, as a blogger, um, it has helped me very much
Yes.
to be vulnerable. Um,
Mhm.
when I was younger, I was terrified of being vulnerable because would you like me? Okay. Would you laugh at me? Um, I don't know if it's today's society or my age, but when I decided to start blogging and then start the podcast, I realized that I was not alone. But yet, for so long in my life, I thought I was. Um, you know, my mother always used to say to me, "Don't hang out your dirty laundry for the neighbors to see."
Yeah. Mhm.
And when I started podcasting, my mom said to me, "Why are you talking about certain subjects?"
Yep.
And one subject that I did a whole year on was, you know, medicine for women, that we are totally different than men.
Yes.
Most of our doctors have been men. When you go to them, if it's not written down in a textbook, it's usually, "Don't worry, go home, you'll get over it." And I said to my mother, "Look at these ailments I've had. I haven't gotten over them. In fact, there's been more because nobody's wanted to address them. But yet, when I started talking about them, not only did I have other people contact me to say, Karen, I've had that same ailment. Or a doctor contact me and say, did your doctor ever try X? And it was like this whole world opened up.
Yeah.
So I think that's what you get out of podcasting as well, is like, you know what? Okay, I'm going to put my heart out there. But somebody is going to understand it and they're going to hold it gently with me.
You're absolutely right. And that's the reason why I love fellow podcasters and bloggers, because you totally understand. Absolutely. And for me, it doesn't matter about age. It just matters about, are you willing to have that open perspective? And that's, I think it's just refreshing to deal with people like yourself, because it's so much easier to have a conversation about literally anything.
Absolutely.
And it really opens your mind to realize that you're not alone, and it's okay that you're thinking like this. Because one of my biggest fears that I had was, should I even be thinking like this? You know what I mean? Should I even be feeling like this? There was that, it was that fear factor of the matter. And I realized that, you know what, at the end of the day, when I die, it's not going to matter. So what does it matter now? So I think it came down to more so looking at myself in the mirror, and not in at an egotistical point of view, but as just an in-depth personnel type of, viewpoint, that
Right.
I think we all just have to really look at ourselves, like stop looking at the facial and the appearances and how you appear and whatever in your clothes. It's just about, how does your inside really feel?
Absolutely. And, it's interesting because, like many of us, I've been through therapy on and off a good portion of my life. And I remember in the beginning when I went through therapy, it was like I was leaving everything in that room with the therapist.
Yeah.
Even though they would say, you may want to try this, or you may want, it was like just a tiny little thing. And it was like, that's not going to get me where I need to go. And the last time I was in therapy probably was about 8 years ago. And when I decided to call it off, I said to the therapist, you're a nice person. However, my copay is getting me nowhere, but my podcast is helping me. So for me to sit in here and tell you what I'm going through, and for you to look at me like, really, Karen, is that what you're thinking? Is that what you think the issue is? I said, it's making me feel worse. And she looked at me and she said, well, I don't mean to do that. I said, I know, but you're human. You could be could be a great therapist, but you're human. And so there are times you look at me like, or at least I'm reading into it, that I must be crazy. And
Yeah.
a year after leaving her, I wrote her an email and I said, I have found myself, and I'm going to keep searching for the rest of my life, because who I am today is not who I'll be tomorrow. And she
Yes.
wrote me back and she said, well, I guess you learned something in therapy. And I just laughed, because it wasn't. It
Don't
was, I learned from you and all the other people that I've talked to.
Yes, exactly. Oh, I love the way that you're able to say that, because it's so true. So true. And it's crazy. She tried to take your joy away. Like,
Right.
no, I'm gonna claim that for myself. Like, no, don't you dare.
So you said your husband will tell you, hey, Mitzi, stop thinking. I'm sure he doesn't really mean that you should stop thinking. Um, how does he really react to your overthinking? Does he understand it? Because
He
sometimes in a
does.
relationship that can be tough.
Yes, it has been tough. Like with my past relationships, they've always said, Mitzi, you're weird for thinking about this right now, because I'd have I'll just randomly speak my mind about, oh, what would they think about
Yeah.
a matter that I'm currently thinking of, and they're just like, that's random. So it was always awkward. But luckily, I have such a good husband where, when I do have those random moments where I spit out like random information and I'm asking him what he thinks, he takes a second and he contemplates on what I say. And depending on how random it is, he might obviously say it's random, but he'll also give me his opinion on the matter. So it's nice. We're very compatible, where I'm thinking something random, he like feeds me on, not to the point where I go drifting away, but to the point where keeps me grounded and allows, and we stay grounded in that thought, and then we just move on, so because of that, it helps me realize that that thought is just a moment, you know what I mean? And I think when we realize that certain thoughts are a moment and not a lifetime, because we allow it to be a lifetime because we feed into it more often than not, it helps me filter out my thoughts more.
And that's terrific. And that's, that's what communication is all about. And really,
Yeah.
that's what we're talking about, that um, these thoughts can create such great conversation. They can ground us, but we need people to listen, not just hear it. They need to listen to it and be able then to, instead of saying, why are you thinking that way? To say,
Mhm.
okay, well, you know, maybe if, and give their opinion and let you know that that is their opinion and their opinion counts, but it doesn't mean that you have to follow it either. It means that maybe you can take something from that and go in the direction that is more comfortable for you.
Yes. Oh, I love that last statement that you said, because I think when we do listen to other people, we realize that we do have similarities, or an understanding of the perspective in that similar context with just certain things. And sometimes we don't, but it's okay because it's how we perceive it within us and how we make it make sense in our mind, And sometimes the thing that boggles me the most is when people are saying the same thing, but yet in different ways, and then they're upset at each other, like, why, you guys are literally saying the same thing. And it's funny because sometimes that happens between me and my husband, and then I would step back and realize, like, we're literally just saying the same thing, just in different ways. So I'm like, not a big deal, and I don't think a lot of people have that moment of just like realizing, like, wait, oh, okay, it all makes sense. They don't have that all the time.
Well, and one of the things that is so common when people are in conversation with each other, they're sitting there waiting to respond. So they're not listening. They're hearing these words. They pick up maybe this little concept, but now it's like, well, I'm going to say this. And what they say in return can cause that conflict. And I don't think it's something that they meant to do. But
Mhm.
if we're not engaged and truly listening, and like you said, your husband takes that moment to say, okay, I'm going to digest this. And now I'm going to say something. But most of us don't.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And I think that's the thing. If we take a moment to just reflect and actually just listen, just listen to what other people have to say, I think that's the thing. We hear things, but we don't really listen to what's being said. And I feel that once we start doing that, not only ourselves will change, but our community will change, our environment will change, the world will eventually change, because half of the battles and wars that we're all dealing with is just because of miscommunication and misunderstanding. And I feel like it's all of this mayhem could just be avoided. It's crazy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, what are some of the subjects that you talk about on your podcast so that our listeners can engage in those as well?
Yeah, yeah. I've talked about recently, superstitions, like the crazy types of superstitions that are out there. I've talked about having a sensitive personality. I've talked about having a victimized personality. I've talked about human trafficking. I've talked about slavery. I've talked about pedophilia. I've talked about incest. No topic literally goes untouched when it comes to my podcast, because there's someone who's dealing with it. There's someone who's like trying to figure out what it really means. And what I've realized is that everyone grows up with a certain perspective of a word, of an emotion, of a taboo, of just some type of understanding. We all grow up with some type of understanding. And when we really branch out and we dive into each topic, then we really get to evaluate our perspective versus what science has given us, what statistics has given us, and what the factual definition of what that word means, and how it all comes together, and then we can really sit back and realize, like, now what does it really mean to me? Because one day I was talking about resentment, and my husband had a certain perspective on resentment and I had a certain perspective on resentment. But once I actually Googled it, he was like, man, that's not how I think about it. But it just shows that you don't think about certain things in the way that it is. So then you confuse things, and then you can misrepresent what you're really feeling. And I feel like that's the thing. A lot of people are misrepresenting what they're really feeling onto other people. And that's what causes those issues in relationships and friendships and anything really,
Right. Well, and if we think about how our society has changed, okay, um, I'm in an interfaith marriage, and so I truly understand people who are in a relationship that is not considered the norm, okay, and I look at my husband and myself and I say, we were brought up differently, but we had so many similarities. And because of those similarities, that's what brought us together. And do we talk about the differences? Yes, because it makes us stronger, but it also makes me more adaptive to others in the world. I don't look at somebody and go, oh, it's an interracial marriage. Okay, you're a marriage, you are a couple. The same thing, you can have, you don't have to look the same to be in love. You don't have to look the same to be friends. And once our world can see that the things that are keeping us separated, and it's exactly what you said, is certain words that we heard growing up that were defined by either grandparent, parent, something on TV that triggered us and said, oh, that isn't going to work. We have to get rid of those. We have to start looking at the bigger picture and what makes you feel good. And if it makes you feel good, that's the beginning. Okay. But I don't have to make you feel the same way I do.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's the biggest thing too, is just projecting out your own feelings and emotions and expectations onto other people will drive you crazy. Will
Absolutely.
literally drive you crazy, and especially if you don't communicate those expectations and all of that to somebody, then it'll literally drive you crazy. Like I've heard people get so upset at their significant other just because they fail to communicate, but they should know better. But nobody should know better. You know
Right.
what I mean? Nobody has that. I can read your mind. Nobody has that. And if they do have it, please raise your hand, because I would love to know what you're really thinking about. I would love to pick your mind. Come to me.
Well, it is funny because my husband and I next week will be married 38 years. And yes, we sort of can tell at times what the other one's thinking, but there are a lot of times that I'll look at him and I have no idea where his brain is. Okay. He says I'm a little easier to read and he does react to me, but things he doesn't understand is when I'm thinking, why aren't you doing the dishes? Or why aren't you vacuuming? And he'll say to me, I'm not a brain reader. If you want me to vacuum, just tell me. But you are so right. We have to tell people what it is we need. Doesn't mean that they have to do what we need, but if they can understand what we need and we've expressed it and they can express it back, why they can't give that to us, that's okay too. It's a better understanding in life.
Correct. I absolutely agree.
So how often do you do your podcast? And do you invite guests on your podcast?
Yes, I do invite guests on my podcast right now. I have about 50 guests on my show. And I have my podcast every Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 p.m. So I try to do like every other week emotions and taboos, but with my special guests, they're just so random that I'm just allowing it to be however it comes. You know what I
Abs-
mean? Like I've talked about God in certain podcasts with my guests. I've talked about, people have shared their personal trauma on my show. And, those are the ones that are really deep. Those are the ones, like I had this one lady, she really took her time to tell me her story about how there was incest and molestation and when she was a child. And, I could feel that energy, you know what I mean? And I was like, if you want to take a moment, like, please, it's okay. If this is just too uncomfortable, like, it's okay. So, like, I get really like deep with people, I don't know if it's just because they just feel comfortable, but I most definitely make it a very safe and comfortable environment when it comes to being a guest on my show. And if anybody would love to be on a guest on my show, please reach out to me because I think people need to hear other people's stories. I think
Absolutely.
everyone holds a testimony, holds a story inside of them that somebody may be going through right now, and they may feel lost, or they may not have a direction of what could happen next, or if there's any light at the end of the tunnel. And I want to keep hope alive, and the saddest thing I hear all the time is there's no point to hope anymore because I'm always disappointed. And I feel like it just comes down to our expectations when it comes to hope, and where do we have that expectation and how we envision it, because will you still be disappointed if what you want doesn't come in the form that you actually see it coming? And
Right.
that's the biggest way people get disappointed, is that they have a goal, but once they reach their goal, they're disappointed because it's not how they imagine it to be. But you accomplished your goal, that should be your milestone, that should be your hurrah moment. But people still don't have that, and people don't can't accept what other people do for them because their hope in them is in the wrong direction because of how they're seeing it. So, I most definitely try to bring various perspectives out there just because it's important. There's so many narrow-minded individuals nowadays. They only see things in one direction with blinders on. It's like we need to take those blinders off, be an overthinker with me and let's really think about it, because
Absolutely.
overthinking, I don't see it as a bad thing anymore. I just see it as when I think with other people, and when I express my what I'm feeling inside, and if somebody doesn't understand or they don't reciprocate in the same energy or same way as me, I just see it as a way they're not ready yet. You know what I mean? They're just not ready, and it's okay, because the day that you are ready to explore that thought with me, then you will be really open for what I have to say. So that's why I say I'm not for everybody. I may not be for everybody, but if I am for you, then you will enjoy your time with me because I always have fun with
Well,
it.
and it's interesting when we're growing up as little kids, and I'm going to say before we even start school, everybody is our friend. We get along with everybody. Typically, even if one little kid, takes a toy out of your hand, you get over that. But there's something about once we start in school, there's a little bit of competitiveness and we start judging each other. And it, you know, whether you want to or not, it just becomes part of who we are. And I remember in elementary school that I was fine up until about third or fourth grade. I moved to another school and there was a competitiveness in fourth grade. And I didn't think I looked like the other girls. I didn't wear the same clothes as all the other girls. Um, I didn't have a rapport with boys, in the fourth and fifth and sixth grade. And so I felt different. I felt like, what is wrong with me? And I know I came home and I cried regularly to my parents. And my parents would say, what every good parent should say, there's nothing wrong with you. Um, but my mother always said, well, then go find some different friends. And it was like, where am I going to find them? Um, it took me many years to understand that I did have friends. Okay. But I was looking, like you said, with blinders, and I only wanted those that considered to be the most popular. I didn't realize I had all these other people that were my friends. And I think we have to start talking to our kids about that more and more, because it's what we learned very young that stays with us. And it wasn't really until my young adulthood that I realized, hey, I have friends. I've been crying for 15, 18 years thinking that I didn't have anybody in my life. And wow, look at the people that I have. And I don't call those 5,000 on Facebook necessarily my friends. Many of them are just acquaintances. Okay. I can probably call, my closest friends on one or two hands. And
Yeah.
you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. Having 5,000 friends, I can't be good to all of them. So
I absolutely agree. And I think what you said was right, because when I was younger, I went to so many different schools. I went to like 4 different grade schools, 8 different middle schools, and 3 different high schools.
wow.
And each time when we moved around from different states and different cities, I felt exactly what you said. I felt the comparison. I felt the competition. I felt the, unwanted. I felt that pressure, and I didn't realize who was real friends and who wasn't. And it was stressful. I totally understand what you're saying. And I think the biggest thing that got me through it was realizing that it's okay. You know what I mean? But I didn't realize, it took me a long time to
Right.
realize that, until like after high school. I realized, once I got into college, I realized, you know what, it's okay. People really don't care. Like, I don't really care. Like, third grade, who cares? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't care about anybody's perspective of me when I was 7 years old or I was 10
Right.
years old. Like, if you can't accept who I am now and the
You
woman
got
that I
it.
am today, then you know what? It doesn't matter. You're not supposed to be in my life, and if you have that, if you want to continue that perspective, well, then more for you, let it marinate in your pot.
Absolutely. Well, Mitzi, how can our listeners find you? Because I want to put it in the show notes. I want to make sure that they listen to your podcast as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. You could check out MitziThinkInc.com. Mitzi is spelled Mitzi, ends with an I, not a Y. There's a Z in there too.
I
I've had
love
a
it.
lot of people like put Missy or Mitzi or all these different things, but no, it's just Mitzi with an I. So MitziThinkInc.com. But my podcasts are literally everywhere. I have a YouTube channel that has my podcast available. You can find me on any podcast station. We could Google, say, hey Google, pull up Mitzi Let's Think about it, and then you'll find me. Or Alexa, like I've had people pull them up on Alexa and on Google, and they've done it, so it's really cute. I've done it too on my mom. So you can literally find me anywhere and everywhere, Tuesdays and Thursdays. And if you want to know a schedule of what's coming out, check out MitziThinkInc.com. I have a schedule of my upcoming episodes, so that you can keep up with certain topics you want to listen to. If you don't want to listen to one, hey, that's okay. That may not be in your perspective right now, but maybe something else will, and whatever that is tickling your mind right at the moment, let me know. And if you want to be a guest, go to MitziThinkInc.com. There's a way to message me, reach out to me personally if you have a story, a testimony, or a certain topic that you are passionate about and feel that other people should be aware of that topic as well. Please reach out to me, because I think the more awareness on certain topics, the better understanding we all will have on that topic.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you for joining us today, and we will have all this in the show notes. So for those of you listening, you said, what did she say? Don't worry about it. You'll be able to go to the show notes. You'll find her website. There'll be information on how to get to her podcast. And I know there are a lot of people out there who are going to feel really, really good when they listen to your podcast and realize, you know what? I'm not alone. Hey, I've got a friend out there.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Say hi to your husband for us, okay?
I sure will. And thank you so much for having me on the show and just sharing my perspective with you. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Have a great day, Mitzi.
Thank you.